You want to win people over? Start by becoming someone worth knowing. Not by being loud, but by being real. Not by impressing, but by connecting. The truth is, people are drawn to those who make them feel seen, heard, and valued. It's not charm. It's not status. It's presence. And presence is built from self-respect, emotional control, and an unshakable sense of purpose. If you want to influence others, you must first master yourself. In this video, I'll show you how. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Let me tell you something that took me years to understand. You can't fake sincerity. I've watched countless people try, putting on their best smile, rehearsing their lines, perfecting their handshake. But here's what they don't realize. The human heart has an extraordinary ability to detect what's real and what's performance. Think about the last time someone truly listened to you. Not the mechanical nod of politeness, but genuine interest. Remember how that felt? That's the power of sincerity. It cuts through the noise of our daily interactions like a knife through butter. I've spent decades teaching people how to win friends and influence others. And do you know what I've discovered? The moment you start acting friendly instead of being friendly, you've already lost. People aren't fooled by the mask you wear. They might not call you out on it, but deep down, they know. Here's what most people don't understand. Sincerity isn't a technique, it's a way of being. When you truly care about others, you don't need to remember to smile. You don't need to force yourself to listen. These things happen naturally because your interest is genuine. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you caught yourself performing instead of just being? We all do it. We put on our professional face for meetings, our social face for parties, our networking face for business events. And every time we do, we create a barrier between ourselves and authentic connection. The solution isn't complex, but it requires courage. It requires you to drop the act, to show up as yourself, to care about people not because it's advantageous, but because every human being has a story worth hearing, dreams worth understanding, and wisdom worth learning from. Start with this. In your next conversation, focus entirely on understanding the other person. Not planning your response, not thinking about how you look, just pure, genuine curiosity about their world. Watch what happens. You'll notice something remarkable. The conversation flows naturally. The other person opens up more. The connection deepens. This is because sincerity has a magnetic quality. When you're genuinely interested in others, they become genuinely interested in you. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you're being real. I've seen this transform lives. I remember a young executive who came to one of my seminars. He was skilled at networking, knew all the right lines, all the right moves, but people weren't connecting with him. Why? Because they could sense he was running a script. When he finally dropped the act and started showing genuine interest in others, everything changed. Doors began to open, relationships deepened. Opportunities appeared. Here's your challenge. For the next week, catch yourself every time you slip into performance mode. When you notice it happening, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what would I say or do right now if I were being completely sincere? Then do that instead. Remember, sincerity isn't just about being honest. It's about being present. It's about seeing the person in front of you as a human being, not as a means to an end. When you master this, you don't just change how others see you, you change how you see yourself. The beauty of starting with sincerity is that it simplifies everything. You don't have to remember complex conversation strategies. You don't have to maintain different personas for different situations. You just have to be genuinely interested in the people around you. That's it. That's the foundation of all meaningful connection. Let this sink in. The most powerful thing you can offer another person is your genuine interest in their life. Not your advice, not your achievements, not your wit or charm. just your sincere attention and care. This is where true influence begins, not with techniques or tactics, but with the simple decision to be real, to care, to connect human to human, heart to heart. Master this, and you'll never need to worry about making an impression again. You'll be too busy making a difference. Let me share a truth that revolutionized my understanding of human nature. Everyone you meet is carrying an invisible sign that reads, "Make me feel important." The moment you understand this, everything changes. I've spent my life studying what makes some people magnetic while others remain forgotten, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, it's not about how impressive you are. It's about how you make others feel about themselves. Think about the last person who truly made you feel valued. What did they do? More importantly, how did it make you feel? That feeling, that sense of being truly seen and appreciated, is what everyone hungers for. And yet, so few know how to give it. Here's what most people don't understand: making others feel important isn't about grand gestures or lavish praise. It's about the small moments of recognition, the way you remember their name, the way you reference something they told you weeks ago, the way you celebrate their victories, no matter how small. But let me ask you this: how often do you actively look for ways to elevate others? Most people are so busy trying to prove their own importance that they miss countless opportunities to make others feel valued. I remember working with a business leader who was brilliant but couldn't keep his team engaged. He would dominate every meeting with his expertise, thinking he was proving his worth. But what his team really needed was for him to notice their contributions, to acknowledge their insights, to make them feel like their ideas mattered. Here's the paradox: the more you try to prove your own importance, the less important you become in others' eyes. But when you focus on making others feel important, your own importance grows naturally. Let me give you a practical framework for this. Every time you interact with someone, ask yourself 3 questions. What matters to this person? What are they proud of? How can I show them I value their perspective? This isn't manipulation, it's recognition. It's about seeing the gold in others and helping them see it too. When you master this, something magical happens. People don't just remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. I've seen this transform relationships in every context: business, family, friendship. There was a sales executive I worked with who was struggling to connect with clients. His presentations were flawless, his knowledge extensive, but he wasn't closing deals. Why? Because he was so focused on displaying his expertise that he forgot to make his clients feel valued. Once he shifted his approach, started asking more questions, showing genuine interest in their challenges, making them feel like their problems mattered, everything changed. His sales didn't just improve, they skyrocketed. Here's your challenge. In every interaction today, look for one specific thing you can genuinely admire about the person you're talking to. Then find a way to express that appreciation sincerely. Watch what happens. Remember, this isn't about empty flattery. People can smell insincerity from a mile away. This is about genuine recognition. It's about seeing the best in others and helping them see it too. The most powerful words in any language are those that communicate, "I see you. You matter." When you master the art of making others feel important, you don't just change how they see you, you change how they see themselves. And here's the beautiful part. When you become known as someone who makes others feel valued, doors start opening, opportunities appear, relationships deepen, not because you're demanding attention, but because you're giving it in the most meaningful way possible. Think about this. Every person you meet today is fighting some kind of battle you know nothing about. They're carrying hopes, fears, and dreams that you can't see. When you make them feel important, truly important, you're not just being nice. You're giving them strength for their journey. This is the essence of real influence. Not making yourself look big, but making others feel big. Not demanding respect, but giving it freely. Not seeking importance, but conferring it. Master this, and you'll never struggle to build meaningful connections again. Because when you become the person who makes others feel important, you become unforgettable. Let me tell you something that might shock you. The most powerful person in any conversation isn't the one doing the talking, it's the one doing the listening. But not just any kind of listening. I'm talking about the kind of listening that makes people feel understood to their core. I've spent decades teaching this art, and I've watched it transform lives. You see, most people don't listen to understand. They listen to respond. They're so busy planning their next sentence that they miss the heart of what's being said. And in doing so, they miss the opportunity to build real connection. Here's what most people don't understand. When someone is speaking, they're not just sharing words, they're sharing their world, their hopes, their fears, their dreams. Every conversation is an invitation into someone's inner universe. But how often do we actually accept that invitation? Think about the last time someone truly listened to you. Not the distracted nod of someone checking their phone. Not the impatient waiting of someone eager to jump in with their own story. But real, focused, genuine listening. Remember how that felt. That's the power you hold when you master this skill. But let me ask you this. How often do you give others that same gift? How often do you put aside your own thoughts, your own agenda, and simply listen with your whole being? I remember working with a CEO who prided himself on being a great communicator. He could command a room with his presence. His speeches were impressive, but his team was disconnected, disengaged. Why? Because he never truly listened. He heard words, but he missed meanings. He collected information, but he missed connection. Here's the truth. Being the best listener in the room isn't about being silent. It's about being present. It's about creating a space where others feel safe to share their truths. And when you master this, something remarkable happens. People don't just tell you their thoughts, they tell you their secrets. Let me give you a practical framework for masterful listening. First, eliminate distractions. Put away your phone. Turn away from your computer. Face the person fully. Your complete attention is the first gift you give. Second, listen with your whole body. Lean in slightly. Maintain comfortable eye contact. Nod when appropriate. These small signals say, I'm with you, I hear you, you matter. Third, and most importantly, listen for what's not being said. The pauses, the tone shifts, the subtle changes. In expression, often the most important parts of a conversation happen in these spaces between words. I've seen this transform negotiations, heal relationships, and build bridges across seemingly impossible divides. There was a sales manager I worked with who was struggling with client retention. His product knowledge was perfect, his pitch polished, but clients weren't staying. When he learned to truly listen, to understand their underlying concerns, their unspoken fears, everything changed. His retention rate tripled in 6 months. Here's your challenge. In your next conversation, make it your mission to understand the other person so deeply that you could explain their perspective better than they can. Not to show off, but to truly grasp their world. Remember, real listening isn't passive. It's one of the most active things you can do. It requires focus, energy, and genuine curiosity. But the rewards are extraordinary. When you become known as someone who truly listens, something magical happens. People seek you out. They trust you with their ideas, their problems, their dreams. Not because you have all the answers, but because you give them something rare in today's world. Your complete, undivided attention. Think about this. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the person who masters the art of listening becomes invaluable. They become the one people turn to for guidance, for support, for understanding. This is where real influence begins. Not in what you say, but in how you listen, not in how well you express your own ideas, but in how well you understand others. When you master this, you don't just change conversations, you change lives. Let this sink in. The greatest gift you can give another person is your undivided attention. In a world of endless distractions, true listening has become a superpower. Master it, and you'll never struggle to build deep connections again. Because here's the ultimate truth. People may forget what you said, but they never forget how well you listened. They never forget how you made them feel understood. Become the best listener in every room you enter, and watch how the world opens up to you. Let me share a truth that took me years to understand. Your emotions are not your master, unless you allow them to be. In all my years of teaching, I've never seen anyone regret staying calm, but I've seen countless people regret losing their temper. Think about the last time you lost your cool. What did it cost you? A relationship, an opportunity, respect? In that moment of heat, it might have felt satisfying. But in the cold light of day, emotional outbursts always leave us with less than we started with. Here's what most people don't understand. Emotional control isn't about suppression. It's about mastery. It's about being able to feel everything, the anger, the frustration, the disappointment, while choosing how you respond to it. I remember working with a brilliant executive who had everything going for him, except his temper. One burst of anger in a board meeting cost him a promotion he'd spent years working toward, not because he wasn't qualified, but because his emotions made him unpredictable. And no one trusts an unpredictable leader. But let me ask you this. What triggers your emotional storms? Is it feeling disrespected, overlooked, challenged? Understanding your triggers is the first step to mastering them. The power of emotional control lies in the pause, that precious space between stimulus and response. In that space lies your freedom to choose, your power to lead rather than react. Here's a framework I've taught to thousands. When you feel your emotions rising, implement the 3-breath rule. First breath, acknowledge the emotion. Second breath, question its usefulness. Third breath, choose your response. This simple practice has saved countless careers and relationships. I've seen this transform people's lives. There was a sales manager who used to take every rejection personally. His emotional reactions were pushing away potential clients faster than his skills could attract them. Once he learned to master his emotional state, to stay calm in the face of no, his success rate tripled. The truth is, emotional control is the hallmark of leadership. When everyone else is losing their heads, the person who maintains their composure becomes the natural leader, not because they don't feel, but because they've mastered their feelings. Think about the most respected person you know. I'll bet they share this quality, the ability to stay calm under pressure. It's not that they don't experience strong emotions. They've simply mastered the art of channeling those emotions productively. Here's your challenge. For the next week, treat every emotional trigger as an opportunity to practice mastery. When someone cuts you off in traffic, when a colleague takes credit for your work, when plans fall apart, pause, breathe, choose your response. Remember, emotional control isn't about being cold or detached. It's about being deliberate with your energy. It's about choosing which emotions serve you and which ones sabotage you. The most powerful person in any room is often the calmest, not because they're emotionless, but because they've learned to use their emotions rather than be used by them. Consider this. Every emotional outburst is a transfer of power. When you lose your temper, you give away your influence. When you remain calm, you maintain your authority and often gain even more. I've watched this principle play out in boardrooms and living rooms alike. The person who can stay calm while addressing conflict becomes the person others turn to in crisis. They become the rock that others rely on, the leader others follow. This mastery becomes particularly crucial in our digital age, where reactions can be screenshot, shared, and immortalized in seconds. One emotional email, one angry tweet, one heated response can undo years of relationship building. But here's the beautiful part. Like any skill, emotional control can be developed. Every trigger is a training opportunity. Every challenging situation is a chance to strengthen your emotional muscles. Start with awareness. Notice when your emotions begin to rise. Feel the physical sensations, the tightening in your chest, the heat in your face, the tension in your shoulders. These are your early warning systems. Then, practice the pause. Remember, you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to respond to every provocation. Your power lies in your ability to choose your response. Let this sink in. The person who can stay calm in chaos becomes invaluable. They become the eye of the storm, the center of stability that others gravitate toward. Master your emotions, and you master your destiny. There's a magic that happens when you remember someone's name. Their eyes light up, their posture changes, and suddenly the connection deepens. But it goes far beyond just names. The details of people's lives are the building blocks of lasting relationships. Let me share something I've learned over decades of teaching. People don't just want to be remembered, they need to be remembered. In a world where everyone is rushing to be noticed, being truly seen is rare and precious. Here's what most people don't understand. Remembering details about others isn't just about having a good memory. It's about showing you value them enough to pay attention. Every detail you remember is a deposit in the bank of trust and connection. I remember working with a company president who prided himself on being too busy to remember personal details about his team. He thought it made him seem important. Instead, it made him seem indifferent. His leadership suffered not because he lacked skill, but because he lacked connection. But let me ask you this. How does it feel when someone remembers something you mentioned in passing weeks ago? When they ask about your children by name? When they recall your goals and dreams? That feeling of being remembered is powerful, and you have the ability to give it to others. Here's the system I've taught to thousands. First, when you meet someone, hear their name. Don't just listen to it. Hear it. Repeat it back to them. Use it in conversation. Link it to something memorable about them. Second, become a collector of details, their hometown, their hobbies, their ambitions, their challenges, not to manipulate but to understand, not to impress, but to connect. I've seen this transform businesses and relationships alike. There was a sales representative who was struggling to build her client base. She started keeping detailed notes after every interaction, not just about business, but about personal details shared. Within 6 months, her client retention rate was the highest in the company. Think about this. Every conversation contains gems of information, the name of someone's pet, their favorite vacation spot, their proudest achievement. These aren't trivial details, they're keys to deeper connection. Here's your challenge. After every significant conversation today, write down 3 personal details you learned about the other person. Review these notes before your next interaction. Watch how this simple practice transforms your relationships. The power of remembering details goes beyond social grace. It's a fundamental tool of influence. When you remember what matters to others, they remember what matters to you. Let me share a technique that's helped countless people master this skill. The story connection method. When someone shares a detail about their life, connect it to a vivid image or story. If Michael from accounting mentions he's from Seattle, picture him holding a coffee cup in the rain by the Space Needle. The more vivid the image, the stronger the memory. But here's the key. Don't just remember facts. Remember feelings. When someone shares a dream, remember their enthusiasm. When they mention a challenge, remember their concern. These emotional bookmarks make the details stick. Consider this. In every interaction, people are giving you the manual for how to connect with them meaningfully. They're telling you what they value, what they fear, what they dream about. When you remember these details, you're showing them you've read their manual carefully. The digital age has made remembering details both easier and more crucial. Yes, you can keep notes in your phone, but nothing replaces the impact of genuine, unprompted recall. When you remember something someone told you weeks ago without checking your device, it shows you were truly present in that moment. Mastering this skill requires intention and practice. Start small. Focus on one new detail about each person you regularly interact with. Build your detail memory like you'd build a muscle. gradually, consistently, purposefully. Remember, this isn't about showing off your memory. It's about showing you care. The goal isn't to recite facts about people. It's to make them feel valued and understood. Here's a powerful truth. People will forget what you achieved, but they'll never forget how diligently you remembered what mattered to them. In a world of casual connections, being someone who truly remembers is remarkable. Let this be your signature. Not just knowing names, but knowing stories. Not just recognizing faces, but recognizing dreams. Because when you remember what matters to others, you become unforgettable to them. Let me share a secret that has opened more doors than any other skill I've taught. Curiosity is the key that unlocks every heart. In all my years of teaching people how to connect with others, I've never seen anything more powerful than genuine curiosity. Here's what most people don't understand. Everyone you meet is a living library of experiences, insights, and wisdom. But most people are too busy trying to prove their own worth to explore the wealth of knowledge standing right in front of them. Think about the last truly memorable conversation you had. I bet it wasn't with someone who talked at you. It was with someone who was genuinely interested in you. Someone who asked questions you hadn't considered. Someone who made you think deeper about your own experiences. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you approached a conversation with pure curiosity? No agenda, no desire to impress, just genuine interest in understanding another human being's perspective? I remember working with a young executive who was brilliant at presenting his ideas, but struggled to build lasting relationships. His problem? He saw every conversation as a chance to showcase his knowledge rather than an opportunity to learn. When he shifted his focus from being interesting to being interested, everything changed. Here's the paradox. The more interested you become in others, the more interesting they find you. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because genuine curiosity creates authentic connection. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands, the 3 levels of curiosity. Level 1 is fact gathering, the what, when, and where. Level 2 is emotion exploring, the how and why. Level 3 is dream discovering, the what if and what could be. Most people never get past level 1. They ask surface questions and get surface answers. But when you learn to move through all 3 levels, conversations become adventures of discovery. I've seen this transform negotiations, mend relationships, and build bridges across seemingly impossible divides. There was a sales director who was struggling to connect with clients. Her presentations were flawless, but deals weren't closing. When she learned to approach each client with genuine curiosity to understand their challenges, fears, and aspirations, her success rate tripled. Here's your challenge. In your next 3 conversations, make it your mission to learn something fascinating about the other person, something that surprises you, something that changes your perspective. Remember, curiosity isn't about interrogation, it's about exploration. It's about creating a space where people feel safe to share their truths, their dreams, their fears. The most powerful questions are often the simplest. What led you to that conclusion? How did that experience change you? What excites you most about this? These questions show you're not just listening to respond, you're listening to understand. Think about this. Every person you meet knows something you don't. They've experienced things you haven't. They see the world in ways you can't. Your curiosity is the bridge to their wisdom. But here's the key. Your curiosity must be genuine. People can sense when you're asking questions out of obligation rather than interest. Real curiosity comes from a place of humility, from truly believing that everyone has something valuable to teach you. I've watched this principle transform organizations. Leaders who approach their teams with genuine curiosity create cultures of innovation and trust. Why? Because when people feel their perspectives matter, they invest more of themselves in their work. Consider this. In an age of information overload, the ability to ask meaningful questions becomes increasingly valuable. Anyone can Google facts. But understanding someone's personal journey, their insights, their unique perspective, that requires curious conversation. The beautiful thing about curiosity is that it's self-reinforcing. The more you learn about others, the more interesting they become. The more interesting they become, the more curious you get. It's an upward spiral of connection. Start with simple practices. Before every interaction, remind yourself, there's something fascinating about this person, and I'm going to discover it. This mindset shift alone can transform routine conversations into memorable exchanges. Remember, your curiosity is a gift you give to others. When you show genuine interest in someone's story, you're telling them their experience matters. Their perspective is valuable. Their voice deserves to be heard. Let this sink in. In a world where everyone is trying to be interesting, the curious person becomes unforgettable. Not because they say remarkable things, but because they ask remarkable questions. They make others feel remarkable. Master the art of curiosity, and you'll never struggle to connect with others again. Because when you become truly interested in people's stories, they become invested in yours. Let me share a profound truth I've learned over decades of studying human influence. True power speaks in whispers. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most influential. It's the calm, measured voice that commands genuine attention. Here's what most people don't understand. Volume isn't power, it's often a substitute for it. When you speak with calm precision, you're not just communicating words, you're communicating confidence, control, and competence. Think about the most influential person you know. Notice how they speak. I bet they rarely raise their voice. Instead, they draw people in with their presence, their poise, their quiet authority. But let me ask you this. How often do you find yourself raising your voice to make a point? How often do you mistake volume for impact? It's a common trap, thinking that speaking louder will make people listen better. I remember working with a senior executive who believed commanding respect meant commanding volume. His team would physically lean away when he spoke, not because of what he was saying, but how he was saying it. When he learned to lower his voice and speak with calm intensity, his influence skyrocketed. Here's the truth. When you speak with calm confidence, you create a magnetic field of attention. People lean in. They want to catch every word. They're not just hearing you, they're feeling your presence. Let me share a technique I've taught to thousands, the power pause. Before speaking, especially in important moments, take a deliberate pause. Let the silence create anticipation. Then speak slightly slower and slightly quieter than you normally would. Watch how this simple shift changes the energy in the room. I've seen this transform public speakers, negotiators, and leaders alike. There was a sales director who always pitched his products with high energy and volume. His enthusiasm was pushing clients away. When he learned to speak with calm authority, his closing rate doubled. The most powerful speech pattern isn't about volume, it's about variation. It's about knowing when to pause, when to whisper, when to emphasize. Like a masterful conductor, you're leading attention through the rhythm of your words. Here's your challenge. In your next 3 important conversations, consciously speak at 70% of your usual volume. Notice how others respond. Notice how it forces them to lean in, to focus more intently on your words. Remember, speaking with calm isn't about being passive, it's about being purposeful. It's about choosing your words carefully and delivering them with precision rather than force. Think about this. In nature, the most dangerous predators are often the quietest. They don't need to roar to command respect. Their presence does it for them. The same principle applies to human interaction. Consider the impact of a whispered secret versus a shouted announcement. Which one captures more attention? Which one feels more important? The whisper draws people in. It creates intimacy. It demands focus. I've watched this principle transform confrontational situations. When someone raises their voice in anger, responding with calm quietness completely changes. The dynamic? It's like martial arts, using the opponent's energy against them. The beauty of speaking with calm is that it's self-reinforcing. The calmer you speak, the calmer you feel. The calmer you feel, the more authority you project. It's an upward spiral. Of influence, here's a powerful truth. The human brain is wired to pay special attention to quiet, controlled voices. It's an evolutionary response. Our ancestors learned that loud noises usually meant danger, while quiet, focused communication often carried vital information. Start practicing this in low-stakes situations. In casual conversations, consciously modulate your voice. Play with pace and volume. Notice how different vocal patterns create different responses in others. Master this art, and you'll find yourself needing fewer words to make your point. Because when you speak with calm precision, people don't just hear your words, they feel your power. Let this sink in. In a world of noise, the calm voice becomes remarkable. In a room full of shouting, the quiet voice commands attention, not because it's loud, but because it's purposeful. Your voice is an instrument of influence. Learn to play it with precision, with purpose, with power. Because when you master the art of speaking with calm, you master the art of being heard. Remember, the goal isn't to be quiet, it's to be compelling. It's not about whispering. It's about speaking with such clear intention that volume becomes unnecessary. When you achieve this, you don't just change how others hear you, you change how they respond to you. Let me share something remarkable about human nature. People make up their minds about you in the first 5 seconds of meeting you. Before you speak a single word, before you share your credentials, before you even smile, they've already formed a powerful first impression. Here's what most people don't understand. First impressions aren't just about how you look. They're about the energy you bring into a room. They're about the silent messages your presence communicates before you say a word. Think about the last time you met someone and instantly felt drawn to them. What was it about their presence that captured your attention? Chances are it wasn't what they said. It was how they made you feel in those first crucial moments. But let me ask you this. What invisible messages are you sending in your first 5 seconds? What story does your presence tell before your words begin? I remember working with a brilliant consultant who couldn't understand why she wasn't winning clients. Her expertise was outstanding, her presentations impeccable, but she was losing deals in the first 5 seconds. Her uncertainty showed in her entrance, her handshake, her initial eye contact. Here's the truth. People aren't just reading your words, they're reading your energy. They're assessing whether you believe in yourself before deciding whether to believe in you. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands. The 3 pillars of presence. First, your physicality, how you carry yourself. Second, your energy, thus emotional atmosphere you create. Third, your focus, where you direct your attention in those crucial first moments. Most people focus solely on the first pillar, their appearance. But it's the combination of all 3 that creates an unforgettable first impression. I've seen this transform careers and relationships alike. There was a young executive who kept getting passed over for leadership roles. His knowledge was superior, but his presence was weak. When he learned to master these 3 pillars, opportunities started flowing his way. Here's your challenge. Before your next important interaction, take 30 seconds to set your presence. Square your shoulders, take 3 deep breaths, and decide what energy you want to bring into the room. Remember, mastering first impressions isn't about creating a false image. It's about ensuring your best self shows up first. It's about removing the barriers that prevent others from seeing your authentic value. Think about this. Every time you enter a room, you're telling a story. Your posture, your facial expression, your energy, they're all chapters in that story. Make sure they're telling the story you want to tell. The most powerful first impressions come from alignment, when your outer presence matches your inner certainty. when you know your value and let it show in how you carry yourself. Consider this. In the animal kingdom, presence is everything. A lion doesn't need to roar to command respect. Its presence does the work. Humans aren't so different. We respond to presence before words. I've watched this principle transform networking events. The people who master their presence don't need to work the room. The room works for them. People are naturally drawn to those who've mastered the art of entrance. Here's a powerful truth. People will forget what you wore, but they'll never forget how your presence made them feel. That feeling, that first emotional impression, shapes every interaction that follows. Start with awareness. Notice how you enter spaces. Notice your default facial expression. Notice where your eyes go first. These small details create powerful first impressions. The beauty of mastering first impressions is that it becomes automatic. Just like an athlete who's practiced their swing thousands of times, your powerful presence becomes natural. Let me share the 4-point check I teach to executives. Before any important interaction, check your posture, straight but not stiff. Your expression, open and engaged. Your hands, visible and relaxed. And your eyes, focused and confident. But here's the key. Your first impression isn't just about you. It's about making others feel comfortable and valued in your presence. The strongest first impressions are those that create space for a connection. Think about your entrance like the opening line of a great book. It should make people want to read more. It should create curiosity, interest, and engagement. Let this sink in. You never get a second chance at a first impression, but you get countless chances to master your entrance. Every new interaction is an opportunity to practice, to refine, to improve. Master this art, and you'll never worry about making an impression again. You'll be too busy making connections. Because when you nail those first 5 seconds, the next 5 minutes, 5 hours, or 5 years become infinitely easier. Remember, people may forget what you said in your first meeting, but they never forget how you made them feel in those first 5 seconds. Make those seconds count. Let me share a paradox that took me years to understand. The moment you stop trying to impress people is the moment you become impressive. In all my years of teaching human relations, I've never seen anyone charm their way into genuine respect. Here's what most people don't understand. The need to impress is actually a confession of insecurity. Every time you try to prove your worth, you're secretly telling the world you're not sure of it yourself. Think about the most genuinely impressive person you know. Notice how they never seem to be trying to impress anyone. They don't need to. Drop names, showcase their achievements, or dominate conversations. Their confidence is quiet because it's real. But let me ask you this. How much of your social energy is spent trying to prove your worth? How often do you feel the need to mention your accomplishments, your connections, your credentials? I remember working with a talented executive who couldn't understand why his team wasn't connecting with him. In every meeting, he'd find ways to remind everyone of his MBA, his previous successes, his industry expertise. What he didn't realize was that every attempt to impress was actually pushing people away. Here's the truth. Real influence doesn't come from impressing people. It comes from connecting with them. It comes from being genuine, being present, and being interested rather than interesting. Let me share a principle I've taught to thousands, the law of authentic presence. When you stop performing and start being present, people don't just see you, they feel you, and that feeling is worth more than any impression you could try to create. I've seen this transform careers and relationships alike. There was a sales director who spent years trying to be the smoothest, most polished person in every room. His sales were mediocre. When he finally dropped the act and started being genuine, acknowledging his uncertainties, showing real curiosity about his clients' needs, his numbers skyrocketed. Here's your challenge. For the next week, catch yourself every time you feel the urge to impress. Instead of acting on that urge, redirect that energy into showing genuine interest in others. Remember, the need to impress often comes from comparing yourself to others. But here's the secret. Everyone else is too busy worrying about their own performance to judge yours as harshly as you think. Think about this. Every time you try to impress, you create distance. You put yourself on a stage and others in the audience. But real connection happens when you step off that stage and meet people where they are. The most powerful social currency isn't impressiveness, it's authenticity. People aren't looking for perfect, they're looking for real. They're not seeking to be amazed, they're seeking to connect. Consider this. In nature, only threatened animals feel the need to make themselves appear larger, more impressive, secure. Creatures are calm in their own skin. The same principle applies to human interaction. I've watched this transform networking events. The people who make the most meaningful connections aren't those with the most impressive elevator pitches. They're the ones who show genuine interest in others. Here's a powerful truth. The energy you spend trying to impress people could be spent understanding them. And understanding creates far more lasting influence than impression ever could. Start with awareness. Notice when you feel the urge to name drop, to humble brag, to steer conversations toward your achievements. These are all symptoms of the impression trap. The beauty of letting go of the need to impress is that it frees up enormous mental energy. Instead of managing your image, you can focus on building real connections. Let me share something I've observed over decades. People who constantly try to impress others are usually the least impressed with themselves. Real confidence doesn't need external validation. But here's the key. Dropping the need to impress doesn't mean becoming passive or diminishing your light. It means letting your natural qualities shine through without forcing them into every conversation. Think about your interactions like a dance rather than a performance. In a dance, you're responding to your partner, moving together, creating something collaborative rather than competitive. Let this sink in. The most impressive thing you can do is stop trying to be impressive, because when you do that, you create space for real connection, real influence, and real respect. Master this principle, and you'll never need to worry about what others think of you. You'll be too busy building genuine relationships. Because when you stop performing and start connecting, you don't just change how others see you, you change how you see yourself. Remember, people may forget the impressive facts you shared, but they never forget how you made them feel. Make them feel seen rather than impressed, and you'll become unforgettable. Let me share a fundamental truth about human nature. Before people will share their thoughts, they need to feel safe sharing their presence. In all my years of teaching human relations, I've never seen trust built through force, only through safety. Here's what most people don't understand. Creating safety isn't about being nice. It's about being trustworthy. It's about creating an environment where others feel they can be themselves without judgment, without risk, without fear. Think about someone you trust completely. What makes you feel safe with them? It's rarely about their achievements or authority. It's about how they make you feel when you're vulnerable, when you're uncertain, when you're real. But let me ask you this. How often do you consciously think about the emotional safety of those around you? How often do you consider whether your presence makes others feel secure or uncertain? I remember working with a company leader who couldn't understand why his team never brought him problems until it was too late. He was brilliant, decisive, and always had the right answer. But his quick judgments and sharp critiques had created an environment where people felt safer hiding issues than sharing them. Here's the truth. People don't open up to those who make them feel judged. They open up to those who make them feel understood. Creating safety isn't about lowering your standards. It's about raising your awareness of how you impact others. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands. The 4 pillars of safety. First, predictability, being consistent in your responses. Second, acceptance, showing respect for different viewpoints. Third, presence, giving your full attention when others speak. Fourth, empathy, seeking to understand before being understood. I have seen this transform organizations and relationships alike. There was a manager whose team was falling apart from internal conflicts. When she learned to create emotional safety, Her team became the most innovative in the company. Why? Because people who feel safe take risks, share ideas, and solve problems together. Here's your challenge. For the next week, make it your mission to be the safest person in every room you enter. Not by avoiding difficult conversations, but by handling them with care and respect. Remember, creating safety isn't about avoiding tension, it's about handling tension with grace. It's about showing others that they can trust you with their truth, even when that truth is difficult. Think about this. Every interaction is either building safety or eroding it. Your responses, your facial expressions, your tone of voice, they're all either saying, "You can trust me," or "You should be careful around me." The most powerful form of influence comes from being someone others trust with their authentic selves, not just their polished professional selves, but their doubts, their fears, their dreams. Consider this. In nature, animals don't reveal their vulnerabilities unless they feel safe. Humans are no different. The depth of connection you create is directly proportional to the safety you provide. I've watched this principle transform negotiations. When people feel safe, they stop defending and start collaborating. They move from protecting their position to exploring possibilities. Here's a powerful truth. People will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how safe you made them feel. That feeling of safety becomes your signature, your brand, your legacy. Start with small moments. When someone shares something personal, notice your immediate reaction. Is it judgment, advice, or presence and understanding? Your response in these moments shapes whether others will trust you with bigger truths. The beauty of creating safety is that it's contagious. When you make others feel safe, they tend to do the same for those around them. You create a ripple, effect of trust and openness. Let me share something I've observed over decades. The most influential people aren't those with the most authority. They're those who create the most safety. Because when people feel safe, they give you their real thoughts, not just their careful ones. But here's the key. Creating safety isn't about being soft. It's about being solid. It's about being someone others can count on, especially when things are difficult. Think about your presence as a sanctuary. When others interact with you, do they feel they need to guard themselves? Or do they feel they can lower their defenses and be real? Let this sink in. In a world full of judgment and criticism, being someone who creates safety is remarkable. It makes you the person others turn to, trust with their truth, and follow willingly. Master this art, and you'll never struggle to build deep connections again. Because when you become known as someone who makes others feel safe, you become invaluable to their growth and success. Remember, people may forget your credentials, but they never forget how secure you made them feel. Make that feeling your trademark, and watch how the world opens up to you. Let me share a truth that has transformed countless presentations and changed innumerable lives. Numbers speak to the mind, but stories speak to the heart, and it's the heart that moves people to action. Here's what most people don't understand. Statistics may win arguments, but stories win hearts. You can drown people in data, overwhelm them with facts, bombard them with bullet points, but until you tell a story that makes them feel something, you haven't truly moved them. Think about the last time you were deeply moved to change something. In your life, was it because of a spreadsheet, or was it because of a story? Something that made you feel, made you see yourself in a new light, made you believe change was possible. But let me ask you this. How often do you rely on facts and figures to make your point when a story would serve you better? How often do you try to convince with logic when you could connect with narrative? I remember working with a brilliant executive who couldn't understand why his presentations weren't inspiring action. His slides were perfect, his data compelling, his logic flawless, but his audience was unmoved. Why? Because he was feeding their minds while starving their hearts. Here's the truth. The human brain is literally wired for story. We've been sharing stories around fires for thousands of years, longer than we've been sharing statistics. Stories don't just convey information. They convey meaning. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands. The 3 elements of unforgettable stories. First, the character, someone the audience can relate to. Second, the conflict, a challenge that creates tension. Third, the transformation, the change that inspires hope. I've seen this transform businesses and careers alike. There was a sales representative who kept losing deals despite having the best product specs in the market. When she learned to those specs and stories, real examples of how her product changed lives, her success rate tripled. Here's your challenge. Take the next important point you need to make. Before you reach for data, ask yourself, what story could illustrate this truth? Find that story and watch how differently people respond. Remember, stories aren't just entertainment. They're vessels for truth. They carry wisdom in a form that the human heart can digest. They make abstract principles concrete and personal. Think about this. Every great movement in history began with a story. Every major change in human behavior was sparked by a narrative that made people feel something deep enough to act. The most powerful stories aren't always the most dramatic. They're the most relatable. They're the ones that make people think, that could be me. I could do that. I could be more. Consider this. When you share data, you're asking people to understand. When you share a story, you're inviting them to experience. Understanding may lead to agreement, but experience leads to transformation. I've watched this principle transform educational settings. Teachers who weave stories into their lessons don't just transfer information, they inspire learning. Their students don't just remember the facts, they remember the meaning. Here's a powerful truth. People rarely act because of what they know. They act because of what they feel. And stories are the most reliable way to make people feel something real. Start with your own stories. What experiences shaped your understanding? What moments changed your perspective? These personal narratives are gold. They combine authenticity with insight. The beauty of mastering storytelling is that it transforms every interaction. Presentations become experiences. Meetings become meaningful. Conversations become memorable. Let me share something I've observed over decades. The leaders who inspire the most loyalty aren't those with the most impressive credentials. They're those who share the most compelling stories. Because stories don't just communicate ideas, they communicate values. But here's the key. Your stories must be true, relevant, and purposeful. They're not about entertaining. They're about illuminating. They should shine light on the truth you're trying to share. Think about your message like a seed and your story like the soil. The richest soil will help that seed grow into something that changes the landscape of people's understanding. Let this sink in. In a world drowning in data, stories are life rafts of meaning. They help people navigate from where they are to where they could be. They make the impossible feel possible. Master this art, and you'll never struggle to move people again. Because when you know how to tell the right story at the right time, you don't just change minds, you change lives. Remember, people may forget the statistics you shared, but they never forget the stories that made them feel something. Make your stories count and watch how they multiply your influence. Let me share a paradox that has shaped my understanding of influence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. In all my years of teaching communication, I've never seen silence wielded more powerfully than by those who understand its strength. Here's what most people don't understand. Silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. When you master the art of silence, you master the art of drawing truth from others, wisdom from situations, and power from restraint. Think about the last time you were in a negotiation or crucial conversation. How comfortable were you with silence? Most people rush to fill every quiet moment, not realizing that silence often speaks louder than words. But let me ask you this. How often do you let silence do the heavy lifting in your conversations? How often do you resist the urge to fill the air with words when tension builds? I remember working with a master negotiator who seemed to get everything he wanted without saying much at all. His secret? He understood that silence creates space for others to reflect, to reveal, to reconsider. Here's the truth. Most people are so uncomfortable with silence that they'll say anything to break it. And in those unguarded moments, real thoughts emerge, true feelings surface, and authentic connections form. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands, the 3 powers of silence. First, the power of drawing out. Silence pulls truth from others like nothing else can. Second, the power of emphasis. What follows a powerful silence carries extra weight. Third, the power of presence. Silence shows you're truly listening, not just waiting to speak. I've seen this transform boardrooms and living rooms alike. There was a CEO who always had the answer, always had the last word. His team was disengaged, resistant. When he learned to embrace silence, to create space for others' thoughts, everything changed. Here's your challenge. In your next 3 important conversations, practice the 10-second rule. After someone finishes speaking, count to 10 in your head before responding. Watch what happens in that space. Remember, silence isn't about being passive. It's about being purposeful. It's about creating space for truth to emerge, for wisdom to surface, for authenticity to appear. Think about this. Every great performer knows the power of the pause. It's the silence between the notes that makes the music. The same is true in conversation. The spaces between words often carry the most meaning. The most powerful form of silence isn't empty. It's expectant. It's the silence that says, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm giving your words the weight they deserve. Consider this. In nature, the most alert animals are often the quietest. They understand that silence is both a shield and a sensor. It protects them while revealing what's around them. I've watched this principle transform conflicts. When emotions run high, the person who masters silence often masters the situation. Not through force, but through the power of restraint. Here's a powerful truth. People will tell you more in your silence than they ever will in your words. Your silence gives them permission to explore their own thoughts, to reach their own conclusions. Start with small moments. When someone shares something important, resist the urge to immediately offer advice. Let your silence hold space for their experience. The beauty of mastering silence is that it makes your words more valuable. When you speak less, people listen more. Your words carry more weight because they know you don't waste them. Let me share something I've observed over decades. The most influential people aren't those who speak the most. They're those who speak with the most purpose. They understand that every word they don't say adds power to those they do. But here's the key. Silence must come from strength, not fear. It should be a tool of engagement, not escape. Powerful silence draws people in. It doesn't push them away. Think about your silence like a spotlight. It illuminates whatever it touches. When you're silent, you direct attention, you create focus. You build anticipation. Let this sink in. In a world that can't stop talking, silence becomes remarkable. It makes you the eye of the storm, the center of calm in a sea of noise. Master this art, and you'll never need to raise your voice to be heard again. Because when you know how to use silence, you know how to command attention without demanding it. Remember, people may forget what you said, but they never forget how you listened. Make your silence as intentional as your words, and watch how it multiplies your influence. Let me share a truth that has transformed countless lives. The words you speak into someone's life can become the prophecy they live into. In all my years of teaching human relations, I've never seen anything more powerful than genuine encouragement, delivered at the right moment. Here's what most people don't understand. Encouragement isn't about empty praise. It's about illuminating potential. When you master the art of encouragement, you become someone who doesn't just see people as they are, but as they could be. Think about someone who believed in you before you believed in yourself. Remember how their faith in you changed your own self-image. That's the power you hold every time you open your mouth to speak into someone's life. But let me ask you this. How often do you consciously look for the gold in others? How often do you take the time to articulate the potential you see in them? I remember working with a manager who was brilliant at spotting problems, but couldn't understand why his team's performance was mediocre. He could list every flaw, every mistake, every shortcoming, but he had never learned to spot potential and call it out. Here's the truth. Anyone can point out what's wrong. It takes no special talent to be a critic, but to see what could be right, to see the seed of greatness in someone and help them believe in it themselves, that's an art that changes lives. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands, the 3 levels of encouragement. First, acknowledging. Effort, showing you see their work. Second, recognizing potential, pointing out capabilities they may not see in themselves. Third, casting vision, helping them see a future bigger than their present. I've seen this transform organizations and relationships alike. There was a teacher who was ready to quit because she couldn't control her classroom. When she learned to become a master of encouragement, to spot and amplify the best in each student, her classroom became a place of growth and engagement. Here's your challenge. For the next week, become a detective of excellence. Look for signs of potential in everyone you meet. Then find a way to articulate what you see, specifically and sincerely. Remember, encouragement isn't about making people feel good. It's about helping them become better. It's about shining a light on the path between where they are and where they could be. Think about this. Every great achievement in human history started with someone believing it was possible. Your words of encouragement might be the spark that ignites someone's greatness. The most powerful form of encouragement is specific and future-focused. Don't just say, "Good job." Say, "The way you handled that situation shows real leadership." Potential. Consider this. In nature, everything grows toward the light. Humans are no different. We grow in the direction of encouragement toward those who believe in our potential. I've watched this principle transform marriages, parent-child relationships, and professional partnerships. When you become skilled at encouragement, you become someone who brings out the best in others. Here's a powerful truth. People often see themselves through the eyes of others until they learn to see themselves through their own. Your encouragement can be the bridge between their current self-image and their true potential. Start with observation. Notice the small wins, the effort, the progress. These are the seeds of encouragement. Water them with your words and watch them grow. The beauty of mastering encouragement is that it changes both the giver and the receiver. When you train your eye to spot potential, you become more optimistic, more hopeful, more influential. Let me share something I've observed over decades. The leaders who inspire the greatest loyalty aren't those who demand perfection. They're those who consistently encourage growth. They don't just correct mistakes, they cultivate potential. But here's the key. Your encouragement must be genuine and specific. People can tell the difference between real belief in their potential and empty cheerleading. Think about your words like seeds. Every time you speak encouragement into someone's life, you're planting something that could grow into their future success. Let this sink in. In a world full of critics, encouragers become invaluable. They don't just make people feel better, they make people become better. Master this art, and you'll never struggle to motivate others again. Because when you learn to speak to people's potential, you help them rise to it. Remember, people may forget the praise you gave them, but they never forget how your belief in them changed their belief in themselves. Make your encouragement count, and watch how it multiplies your impact. The most powerful thing about encouragement is its ripple effect. When you encourage someone effectively, you don't just change their day, you might change their life's trajectory, and they in turn become more likely to encourage others. Your words have power. Use them to build, to lift, to inspire, because, in the end, the greatest legacy you can leave isn't just what you achieve, it's how many others you helped believe in their own potential to achieve. Let me share a fundamental truth about influence. Your energy is contagious. Every room you enter, you're either lifting the atmosphere or lowering it. There's no neutral ground when it comes to energy. Here's what most people don't understand. Energy isn't about being loud or animated. It's about being intentional with your presence. The most powerful energy often comes from those who are calm, centered, and purposeful. Think about someone whose presence immediately changes the atmosphere of a room. What is it about their energy that makes such an impact? It's rarely about what they say. It's about the feeling they bring with them. But let me ask you this. How conscious are you of the energy you carry? How intentional are you about the emotional atmosphere you create around you? I remember working with an executive who couldn't understand why his team meetings always felt tense and unproductive. He was competent, prepared, and professional. But his energy, anxious, defensive, controlling, was suffocating creativity and collaboration. Here's the truth. People don't just respond to your words or actions, they respond to your energy. And that energy is broadcasting 24 hours a day, whether you're conscious of it or not. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands, the 3 dimensions of energy management. First, personal energy, your internal state. Second, projected energy, what you broadcast to others. Third, environmental energy, how you affect the space around you. I've seen this transform organizations and relationships alike. There was a sales manager whose team was underperforming despite having the best training and resources. When she learned to manage and project positive, confident energy, her entire team's performance shifted. Here's your challenge. For the next week, before entering any space, whether it's a meeting room, your home, or a social gathering, pause and decide what energy you want to bring. Make it a conscious choice rather than an unconscious habit. Remember, owning your energy isn't about performing. It's about aligning your internal state with your external impact. It's about being authentic while being intentional. Think about this. Every interaction is an energy exchange. When you master your energy, you master your influence. You become someone who can shift the atmosphere of any room you enter. The most powerful energy isn't always the most visible. Sometimes it's the quiet confidence, the steady presence, the unwavering calm that has the greatest impact. Consider this. In nature, animals instantly sense the energy of other creatures. Humans have the same capability. We're constantly reading and responding to each other's energy, often unconsciously. I've watched this principle transform public speakers. The ones who connect most powerfully with their audiences aren't necessarily the most polished, they're the ones who manage their energy most effectively. Here's a powerful truth. Your energy speaks before you do, long before you say a word. People are reading and responding to the energy you bring into a space. Start with awareness. Notice how your energy changes throughout the day. Notice what depletes it and what renews it. These insights are the foundation of energy mastery. The beauty of owning your energy is that it becomes a tool of influence. You can learn to raise or lower the energy of a room, to calm or energize others, to create the atmosphere that best serves your purpose. Let me share something I've observed over decades. The most influential people aren't those with the most authority. They're those with the most consistent, positive energy. They become emotional anchors for others. But here's the key. Your energy must be authentic and sustainable. You can't fake it long term, and you can't maintain what you don't genuinely feel. Think about your energy like a thermostat, not a thermometer. A thermometer just reflects the temperature of the room. A thermostat sets it. Be the thermostat. Let this sink in. In a world of chaos and uncertainty, consistent positive energy becomes remarkable. It makes you someone others want to be around, someone they trust to lead them through challenges. Master this art, and you'll never struggle to influence the atmosphere again. Because when you own your energy, you own the room, not through domination, but through positive impact. Remember, people may forget what you said or did, but they never forget how your energy made them feel. Make your presence count and watch how it transforms every space you enter. Your energy is your signature. It's the unspoken message you send to the world. When you learn to manage it consciously, you don't just change how others respond to you, you change how you experience life itself. Let me share a truth that has stood the test of time. Charisma can open doors, but only consistency keeps them open. In all my years of studying human behavior, I've never seen anything build deep, lasting respect more powerfully than reliable character shown day after day. Here's what most people don't understand. Respect isn't earned in grand gestures. It's built in small moments of consistency. It's not about being spectacular. It's about being dependable. Think about someone you deeply respect. Beyond their achievements, beyond their talents, I bet there's one quality that stands out: their consistency. The way they show up, day after day, living their values without fanfare. But let me ask you this: how consistent are you in your words and actions? How reliable is your character when no one's watching? When pressure mounts? When it would be easier to take shortcuts? I remember working with a brilliant entrepreneur who couldn't understand why he wasn't building long-term business relationships. He could charm any room, close any deal. But his inconsistency in following through, in communication, in keeping his word, was slowly destroying his reputation. Here's the truth. People might be attracted to excitement, but they trust consistency. In a world of constant change, being consistently reliable becomes remarkably valuable. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands: the 4 pillars of consistency. First, emotional consistency, maintaining stable responses under pressure. Second, behavioral consistency, aligning your actions with your words. Third, value consistency, staying true to your principles regardless of circumstances. Fourth, performance consistency, delivering reliable quality in everything you do. I've seen this transform careers and relationships alike. There was a manager whose team was talented but unstable. When she learned to become a model of consistency in her moods, her expectations, her support, her team became the most reliable in the company. Here's your challenge. For the next month, choose one area of your life where you'll be absolutely consistent. No excuses, no exceptions. Watch how this single change affects everything around it. Remember, consistency isn't about perfection, it's about reliability. It's about being someone others can count on, especially when things get difficult. Think about this. Every time you do what you say you'll do, you deposit trust in your relationships. Every time you don't, you make a withdrawal. Over time, these small moments compound into your reputation. The most powerful form of consistency isn't rigid, it's principled. It's not about doing the same things mechanically, it's about reliably honoring your commitments and values. Consider this. In nature, the most enduring forces aren't the most dramatic, they're the most consistent. Water shapes mountains not through force, but through persistent, consistent action. I've watched this principle transform organizations. Leaders who master consistency don't just build teams, they build cultures. Their reliability becomes the foundation others build upon. Here's a powerful truth. People will forgive occasional failures more readily than they'll forgive consistent inconsistency. Because occasional failure is human, but inconsistency signals unreliability. Start with small promises. Be on time. Do what you say. Follow through on commitments. These simple acts of consistency build the foundation of lasting respect. The beauty of mastering consistency is that it simplifies decision-making. When your values and principles are clear and consistent, choices become clearer. Let me share something I've observed over decades. The leaders who inspire the deepest loyalty aren't those with the most charisma, they're those with the most consistency. They become the constants others navigate by. But here's the key. Your consistency must flow from authentic commitment, not rigid discipline. It should be the natural expression of your values, not a performance you maintain. Think about your consistency. Like compound interest, small regular deposits of reliable behavior eventually create an immense reserve of trust and respect. Let this sink in. In a world where many people are consistently inconsistent, being reliably consistent becomes a superpower. It makes you someone others build their plans around, someone they trust with their important matters. Master this art, and you'll never struggle to build lasting relationships again. Because when you become known for your consistency, you become invaluable to others' success. Remember, people may forget individual instances of excellence, but they never forget the pattern of your reliability. Make consistency your trademark, and watch how it transforms your influence. Your consistency tells others who you really are, not who you claim to be, not who you aspire to be, but who you are in the daily moments when character is tested. When you master consistency, you don't just earn respect, you become worthy of it. The power of consistency lies in its compounding effect. Each small act of reliability builds upon the last, creating a foundation of trust that becomes unshakable. Over time, in a world of quick fixes and shortcut solutions, your consistency becomes your competitive advantage. Let me share a profound truth about human relations. The art of disagreement is not about winning arguments, it's about preserving relationships while standing firm in your convictions. In all my years of teaching, I've never seen anyone argue their way into lasting influence. Here's what most people don't understand. The goal in disagreement isn't to prove you're right. It's to find a path forward that respects both truth and, relationship. Because you can win the point and still lose something far more valuable. Think about the last time someone changed your mind about something important. I bet it wasn't through force or humiliation. It was probably through patience, respect, and genuine engagement with your perspective. But let me ask you this. How often do you enter disagreements focused on winning rather than understanding? How often do you listen to respond rather than listen to comprehend? I remember working with a brilliant attorney who could win every argument, but was losing the loyalty of his team. His razor-sharp logic was cutting through more than just opposing viewpoints. It was slicing through relationships. Here's the truth. The way you disagree with someone tells them more about your character than the points you're making. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it that determines your long-term influence. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands, the 4 elements of graceful disagreement. First, acknowledgement, showing you truly understand their real perspective. Second, connection, finding common ground before addressing differences. Third, curiosity, exploring their reasoning with genuine interest. Fourth, contribution, offering your different view as an addition, not a contradiction. I have seen this transform boardrooms and living rooms alike. There was an executive who was always right, but increasingly isolated. When she learned to disagree with grace, to challenge ideas while honoring relationships, her influence soared. Here's your challenge. In your next disagreement, make it your primary goal to understand the other person's perspective so well that you could argue their position for them. Only then share your different view. Remember, disagreeing effectively isn't about softening your position. It's about strengthening your approach. It's about being both kind and clear, both respectful and resolute. Think about this. Every disagreement is an opportunity to either build a bridge or dig a trench. The words you choose, the tone you use, the patience you show, these determine which you create. The most powerful form of disagreement isn't confrontational, it's collaborative. It's not about proving the other person wrong, it's about exploring a better understanding together. Consider this. In nature, the strongest trees are those that can bend in the wind without breaking. The same is true in human relations. Strength isn't about being rigid, it's about being both firm and flexible. I've watched this principle transform negotiations. When people learn to disagree without being disagreeable, resistance often transforms into collaboration. Here's a powerful truth. People are more likely to consider your perspective when they feel their own perspective has been genuinely considered. Validation doesn't mean agreement, it means respect. Start with language. Replace but with and. Instead of, "You're wrong about this, try I see it differently." These small shifts in language create large shifts in receptivity. The beauty of mastering graceful disagreement is that it transforms conflict from a source of stress into a tool for growth. Differences become opportunities rather than obstacles. Let me share something I've observed over decades. The most influential people aren't those who never disagree. They're those who disagree in ways that make others feel heard and respected. But here's the key. Your respect for the other person must be genuine. You can't fake your way through this. Real respect shows in small moments, in your tone, your patience, your willingness to listen. Think about disagreement like a dance rather than a duel. In a dance, both partners move together, even when going in different directions. The goal is harmony, not victory. Let this sink in. In a world where people are increasingly divided, the ability to disagree gracefully becomes invaluable. It makes you someone who can bridge divides rather than deepen them. Master this art, and you'll never fear conflict again. Because when you know how to disagree without making enemies, you become someone who can handle difficult conversations with grace. Remember, people may forget the point you were arguing, but they never forget how you made them feel during the disagreement. Make those moments count and watch how your influence grows. Your approach to disagreement shapes your ability to influence far more than your arguments ever will. When you master the art of graceful disagreement, you don't just win points, you win respect. Let me share a truth that has transformed countless lives. In a world full of critics, the person who lifts others becomes invaluable. Anyone can point out what's wrong, but those who help others rise, they're the ones who change the world. Here's what most people don't understand. Being an elevator isn't about empty praise or blind optimism. It's about seeing potential and actively helping it grow. It's about being someone who doesn't just spot diamonds, but helps polish them. Think about someone who elevated you in your life. Someone who saw more in you than you saw in yourself. Someone who didn't just believe in your potential, but actively helped you reach it. That's the power you hold when you choose to be an elevator instead of a critic. But let me ask you this. How often do you catch yourself slipping into criticism when you could be channeling that same energy into elevation? How often do you point out flaws when you could be highlighting possibilities? I remember working with a company leader who prided himself on his high standards. He could spot every flaw, identify every weakness, point out every mistake. His team was flawless, but fearful, perfect, but paralyzed. They'd stopped growing because they'd stopped daring to try. Here's the truth. Criticism might correct behavior, but elevation transforms performance. When you become known as someone who helps others rise, people don't just work with you, they flourish around you. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands. The 4 powers of elevation. First, vision, seeing potential others might miss. Second, belief, holding that vision even when others doubt. Third, support, providing resources and opportunities for growth. Fourth, celebration, acknowledging progress and encouraging continued growth. I've seen this transform organizations and lives alike. There was a manager whose department was underperforming despite her rigorous feedback system. When she shifted from being a critic to being an elevator, focusing on developing strengths rather than just correcting weaknesses, her team became the company's most innovative division. Here's your challenge. For the next week, every time you feel the urge to criticize, pause and ask yourself, how could I elevate instead? How could you turn that moment of correction into a moment of growth? Remember, being an elevator isn't about ignoring problems. It's about approaching them with a growth mindset rather than a fault-finding one. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities for development rather than reasons for criticism. Think about this. Every interaction is an opportunity to either diminish or develop someone's potential. Your words, your attention, your energy, they're either lifting people up or wearing them down. The most powerful form of elevation isn't just about making people feel good, it's about helping them become better. It's about combining high standards with high support. Consider this. In nature, things grow best in nurturing environments. Humans are no different. We thrive under cultivation, not criticism. We bloom under encouragement, not judgment. I've watched this principle transform education. Teachers who master the art of elevation don't just transfer knowledge, they inspire growth. Their students don't just learn, they flourish. Here's a powerful truth. People will work harder to live up to your faith in them than they will to prove your criticism wrong. Your belief in their potential becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Start with awareness. Notice your default response to others' mistakes or shortcomings. Is it to correct or to develop, to criticize or to elevate? These instinctive reactions shape your impact on others. The beauty of being an elevator is that it creates a ripple effect. People who feel elevated tend to elevate others. You're not just lifting one person, you're creating a culture of growth. Let me share something. I've observed over decades, the leaders who create the most powerful legacies aren't those who maintain the highest standards. They're those who help the most people reach those standards. But here's the key. Your elevation must be genuine and grounded. It's not about flattery or false praise. It's about authentic belief coupled with active support. Think about your influence like a ladder. Every interaction either offers others a step up or pushes them down. Make sure you're building ladders, not digging holes. Let this sink in. In a world where criticism is abundant, elevation becomes remarkable. It makes you someone people seek out, someone they trust with their dreams, someone they want to follow. Master this art, and you'll never struggle to build high-performing teams again. Because when you become known as an elevator, you attract people who want to grow, who are willing to strive, who are ready to rise. Remember, people may forget the criticism that corrected them, but they never forget the person who helped them. Rise, make that your legacy, and watch how it multiplies your impact. Your choice to elevate others doesn't just change their trajectory, it defines your own. When you become an elevator, you don't just lift others, you rise yourself. Let me share the ultimate truth about lasting influence. Your reputation isn't built in your presence, it's built in your absence. What people say about you when you're not in the room becomes your true measure of impact. Here's what most people don't understand. Being memorable isn't about being the loudest or the most impressive. It's about being the most impactful. It's about creating value that continues to resonate long after you've left the conversation. Think about someone who immediately comes to mind when others need wisdom, support, or guidance. They've achieved something remarkable. They've become a resource in people's lives, not just a presence in their conversations. But let me ask you this. What do people say about you when you're not there? Are you known for what you take or what you give? For what you say or what you do? For how you make others feel or how you make yourself look? I remember working with a successful executive who was puzzled why he wasn't being considered for senior leadership. His presentations were flawless, his results impressive. But in his absence, people spoke of his self-promotion rather than his contribution. His reputation was working against him. Here's the truth. Your lasting reputation isn't built on your achievements. It's built on your impact on others. It's not about the titles you hold, but the lives you touch. Not the success you achieve, but the success you help create for others. Let me share a framework I've taught to thousands. The 4 pillars of lasting reputation. First, consistency. Being reliable in both presence and absence. Second, contribution. Adding value without keeping score. Third, character. Maintaining integrity, especially when unobserved. Fourth, connection. Creating impact that continues beyond your presence. I've seen this transform careers and lives alike. There was a sales professional who was struggling despite having the best numbers in her company. When she shifted her focus from personal achievement to client success, becoming someone people talked about as a trusted advisor rather than just a top performer, her influence soared beyond her direct interactions. Here's your challenge. For the next month, focus not on what people think of you in the moment, but on what story your actions will tell in your absence. What seeds are you planting that will grow even when you're not there to tend them? Remember, your reputation isn't just about what you do, it's about the impact that remains after you're gone. It's about becoming someone whose influence continues to work even in their absence. Think about this. Every interaction plants a seed of reputation. These seeds grow into the stories others tell about you, the recommendations they make, the opportunities they think of when your name comes up. The most powerful reputation isn't built on what you claim about yourself, it's built on what others claim about you. It's not your words that echo in your absence, but your impact. Consider this. In nature, the most successful species aren't those that make the biggest impression. They're those that contribute most to their ecosystem. The same is true in human relations. I've watched this principle transform organizations. Leaders who focus on their legacy rather than their image don't just succeed in the moment. They create lasting positive change that continues long after they've moved on. Here is a powerful truth. People won't remember most of what you say or do, but they'll never forget how you made them feel and what you helped them achieve. That becomes your reputation. Start with intention. Before each interaction, ask yourself, what impact do I want to have that will continue beyond this moment? Let that guide your words and actions. The beauty of building a positive reputation is that it creates opportunities you don't have to chase. People seek you out. Doors open. Opportunities appear, not because you're pursuing them, but because your reputation is working for you. Let me share something I've observed over decades. The most powerful reputations aren't built on personal brilliance. They're built on how much you help others shine. They're built on the success you help create, not just the success you achieve. But here's the key. Your reputation must be earned authentically. You can't manufacture it through impression management. It must flow naturally from who you are and how you impact others. Think about your reputation like a garden. Every action, every interaction, every choice is either planting something positive or allowing weeds to grow. What are you cultivating? Let this sink in. In a world of carefully curated images, authentic positive impact becomes remarkable. It makes you someone people trust, recommend, and seek out, even when you're not in the room. Master this art, and you'll never need to promote yourself again. Because when you become known as someone who consistently creates value for others, your reputation becomes your most powerful advocate. Remember, people may forget the details of your achievements, but they never forget the impact you had on their lives. Make that impact positive, make it lasting, and watch how your influence multiplies beyond your presence. Your true reputation is the echo of your character. When you focus on creating value that outlasts your presence, you don't just build a reputation, you build a legacy.